and the Secretary of HHS will determine the opt-out procedure, which may be quite complicated. There are numerous civil penalties all throughout this bill for physicians for overpayment, ER readmissions that are considered by her to be not justifiable, violations of rules, documentation, audits. All of these are just filled with civil penalties against the physician. Well, I can tell you as someone who practiced under Medicare and Medicaid, you're always aware of that, and you tend not to treat patients who are probably going to have you end up in court or end up in prison because you overlooked some rule that you weren't even aware of. And there are literally tens of thousands of rules with every...
And so doctors now become file clerks, but then you can bow down and sign in to be a government minion, though, and then they're going to let you do whatever you want. Correct, doctor?
Well, you can't do what you want. You're terrified. Every time you treat a patient, you're absolutely terrified that the government is going to come after you and say, you did something wrong according to such and such rule that you didn't even know existed.
Amazing. Stay there, Dr. Blaylock. We'll come back, go through more of the bill. All right, final segment with Dr. Russell Blaylock. Sir, continue. I know there's hundreds of lies in there, but you were getting into the fact that it gives dictatorial power for the government to do whatever it wants. It's a blank check. Same thing with the gun bills they've introduced. Go ahead, sir.
It even says 18 months, a year later, the HHS secretary can write new laws that are covered by this bill, design whole departments, take over medical education in the United States. That's written in the bill, the slow takeover of medical education. Now, doctors used to give away free health care all the time. I've given away at least $1 million worth of health care in my practice. But now it is against the law to give free health care to any medically covered patient by the federal government. That's a crime. So you can no longer do that. So this government saying that they care about people is an absolute lie, and socialists never care about people. In this bill, it says there will be periodic investigations to determine compliance with rules and regulations. Coding, this is the big rationing of care. They created a coding system called DRG, which you code everything you do to a patient from the most minor thing on. It's a confusing morass of rules. No one knows how to code properly. But if you miscode, you can go to jail. You can end up with huge fines. Under this bill, it says now codes will be bundled. Therefore, if you get a patient in that has very complex disease, a lot of things wrong with them, instead of getting your coding for each thing that you have to deal with and the amount of time you spend, you just get a lump sum for total treatment of the patient, which means physician pay is going to fall tremendously, so physicians are not going to want to treat the complex cases. And that's just what they want because that's the most expensive care.
And by the way, they have national numbers out. Doctors' pay since 75, according to inflation, has been cut by half. So it's the doctors and the physicians that are being screwed, and that's why more and more people, I know Harvard-educated doctors that are in their 10th, 12th, 13th year of practice and still are paying off their bills from education. Now we have a shortage of doctors and nurses and people because folks don't want to put up with this.
Well, another big surprise to the physicians and patients is as the physician finds that his reimbursements fall dramatically, he's no longer going to be able to afford his office staff or the upkeep of his office. So the federal government will take over that office. I've seen that happen with managed care. They took over all the physicians' offices. If the wives worked in the office, they fired them and completely took over the physician's office. So what that means, you'll no longer go to this nice doctor's office. You're going to be in some warehouse somewhere with everyone else. Imaging services. They have a whole section on page 274, section 1 through 4, that they're going to change the imaging. That is like MRI scans, CT scans. They have to have 75% utilization or they're going to close them down. What that means is there'll be a long waiting line to use these scanners. You've got to have 50% or less utilization any one time in order to have access. So that means a lot of people will never get scanned because they'll be waiting in such a long line, and that's what they want. There's adjustments for determine the abuse and fraud potential of organizations they deal with, or they will be fined by heavy civil penalties. Now, are suddenly doctors supposed to be investigators, and so that if they send a patient to a facility for some care or rehabilitation, they have to know whether this is a high abuse and fraud risk to the federal government? If so, they undergo huge fines, so they'll tend not to send them there. Less rehabilitation. That's rationing. They say that the plan will have increased screening of claims, unannounced site visits, inspections, additional reporting requirements. Physicians will not have time to ever take a vacation or any time off because they will be documenting virtually everything that they do to a patient. It will be massive paperwork. And the physicians will become so frustrated they're going to retire in droves and they're going to quit in droves.
Well, my dad is an oral surgeon and a dentist, and that's nothing like a brain surgeon or something, the amount of paperwork you'd have to do. And he says he spends about half his time now with paperwork, and that's one reason there's such a shortage of care in some cases, because doctors can't trust even their most trusted nurses or office managers to do this stuff, because if they make a mistake, they're going to get in big trouble.
Oh, they could go to prison. The number one rationing is by treatment protocol. And what that says, it tells the physician exactly what he can and cannot do.
That is so criminal. The government practicing medicine. Dr. Blaylock, thank you so much for joining us. RussellBlaylockMD.com is the website. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.